decorated Navy SEAL veteran walks into a small town courthouse to testify for a friend. She's wearing her dress uniform, pristine, pressed, sacred. But a bitter clerk with a grudge against military types decides today is the day she will teach one a lesson. When the clerk orders her to take off her uniform, expecting humiliation, the veteran simply smirks, because the clerk has no idea who she just challenged, or the wave of silent, unstoppable honor that's about to descend on the building. Before we begin, where are you watching from today? And before the story unfolds, please subscribe. These stories exist to honor the silent heroes among us. The command struck the room like a slap. Take off your uniform, now. Every head in the courthouse lobby turned. Conversations froze mid-sentence. Papers rustled to silence. And at the center of it all, standing perfectly still beneath the harsh glow of flickering fluorescent lights, was a woman with eyes like calm storm water. Lieutenant Commander Aria Dalton did not flinch. She simply lifted her gaze toward the clerk who had barked the order, and smirked. "You just told a Navy SEAL to strip," she said, her voice soft, almost amused. And suddenly, the entire lobby remembered how to breathe. Aria Dalton didn't look like the caricature people imagine when they heard the word SEAL. She wasn't towering or broad-shouldered. She stood with a quiet, balanced stillness, the kind that suggested danger only to the people sharp enough to recognize it. Her dark hair was braided neatly, her posture impeccable, her uniform immaculate, every medal perfectly aligned, every crease speaking of discipline that went deeper than muscle. But what stood out most wasn't the ribbons on her chest. It was the strange mixture of exhaustion and iron will in her eyes, the kind seen only in those who had witnessed too much, and carried it anyway. She had come to this courthouse for something simple, almost mundane, to testify on behalf of a fellow veteran in a benefits dispute. But instead, she found herself the center of an entirely different battlefield. One shaped not by bullets, but by disdain. Because the clerk at the reception desk did not like uniforms, and she liked women in uniforms even less. The air conditioning hummed above Aria, but she barely heard it. Her mind often drifted between two worlds, the present and the memories that lived just beneath her skin. 12 years of service had left their marks. None visible, all permanent. Salt water and diesel fumes still lived in the corners of her senses. The taste of metal from the old tanks. The crushing pressure of 100 feet of ocean above. The snap of a parachute in cold night air. The acrid sting of cordite after a firefight. But the memories that gripped her the hardest were quiet ones. The echoing last breaths of teammates she couldn't save. The letters she wrote to mothers who would never again hear footsteps on the porch. The feel of her own hands trembling after missions that demanded more than human limits allowed. Her closest friend, Mason Reyes, had died 2 years earlier. An explosion in a cramped corridor of a freighter they were clearing. The shockwave hurled her backward. The fire stole her vision for a fragmented moment. When she could see again, Mason was gone. She carried his dog tags in her breast pocket even now. A constant weight, a quiet promise. Every step she took in uniform was partially for him. So when she walked into the courthouse today, wearing the symbols of all she'd survived, and all she'd lost, she carried an unspoken dignity that should have commanded respect. Instead, it drew hostility. The clerk, Ms. Redding, was a narrow-faced woman whose resentment had hardened into a permanent pursed lip expression. She sat behind a cluttered desk, tapping irritated fingers against her keyboard as if every keystroke personally offended her. "You can't wear that in here," she had snapped the moment Aria approached. Her voice was sharp, brittle, the sort of tone used by someone who had never held real authority and wanted desperately to feel it. Aria blinked slowly. "My uniform." "No uniforms in the courthouse. It's a policy. A lie. One so flimsy it sagged under its own weight." Aria had glanced at the security guard standing nearby. He looked away quickly, pretending to check his clipboard. Bystanders watched but said nothing. A few lowered their eyes. A couple smirked, as if enjoying the spectacle. One person wielding petty power. Dozens choosing silence. Aria remained still, her posture calm, her breathing even. Years of discipline had taught her that silence could be a weapon sharper than any blade. But Ms. Redding did not see discipline, only defiance. "I'm not going to repeat myself," the clerk had said, voice rising. "Take it off." And that was when Aria smirked. "Mom," Aria said now, her voice steady. My uniform is required for testimony. I don't care, Ms. Redding snapped. This is my desk. My rules. And I'm tired of you people thinking you're special. You people. The term hung in the air like rot. Arya tilted her head, her calm unbroken. Veterans. The clerk scoffed. Violent types. Always expecting praise for doing the jobs you signed up for. A hum of discomfort rippled through the lobby. Someone muttered under their breath. Another shuffled farther away, as though fearing proximity might pull them into the conflict. Arya's jaw tightened ever so slightly, though her expression remained controlled. Silence again. Purposeful, grounded. The security guard shifted uncertainly. Ms. Redding, I don't think... Quiet, she hissed at him. I said what I said. She pointed directly at Arya's uniform jacket. Take it off. Arya didn't move. Instead, she blinked once, slowly, like a predator who had granted a final warning. A subtle shift occurred in the lobby then. A middle-aged man stepped back. A young woman pressed a hand to her mouth. A child tugged on his mother's sleeve and whispered, Mom. She looks like she could take all of us. Arya's braids slid softly against her shoulder as she turned slightly toward the clerk. Is this about policy? She asked quietly, or about pride? The clerk's nostrils flared. Don't get smart with me. A pause. Arya let the silence settle again. She had faced pirates, insurgents, and hostile waters darker than nightmares. This woman was not a threat, but the humiliation she attempted. That was something Arya would not let stand. Not for herself. Not for the uniform. Not for the names stitched invisibly into its fabric. At the far end of the lobby, a door opened quietly. A man stepped out. Tall, wearing a suit tailored enough to suggest he rarely lost in court. His silver hair was cropped military, short, though his posture lacked the stiffness of active service. He paused, noticing the tension. Arya felt the shift behind her but did not look. But he recognized her. His eyes widened with a mix of surprise and recognition, then sharpened into something like anger as he assessed the situation. He did not approach yet. He simply observed, waiting for the moment he knew was coming. Last chance, Ms. Redding said, leaning forward. Take off the uniform, or I call security. Arya raised an eyebrow at the lone security guard, who looked like he desperately wished to evaporate. Call them, Arya replied softly. Her tone was calm, not threatening, simply factual. The kind of calm that hinted she had faced far worse than a disgruntled clerk. A murmur rippled through the lobby again. Phones subtly lifted, screens angled toward the confrontation. Mayam, the guard whispered to the clerk, she's Navy. And her uniform means she's unofficial? I don't care. The clerk barked. I want her out, now. Arya's smirk returned, not mocking but knowing. You're making a mistake, she murmured. Then, the moment everything shifted, a voice from behind them, deep and resonant, filled the lobby. She's right. Everyone turned. The silver-haired man walked toward them, each step echoing authority that didn't need to be shouted. The clerk's face paled. Judge Holloway. You will not, he said sharply. Order a lieutenant commander in the United States Navy to strip in the middle of a courthouse. Gasps fluttered across the room. Redding stumbled back a step. Holloway stopped beside Arya, his expression a mixture of respect and cold fury. Commander Dalton, he said, voice softening. We weren't expecting you to arrive so early. Arya inclined her head, but said nothing. The judge turned back to the clerk. You owe this officer an apology. Immediately. Miss Redding sputtered like an engine coughing its last breath. I was just following. No policy in this courthouse prohibits military uniforms, the judge said. In fact, I have personally encouraged them for testimony. But she, the judge interrupted, has done more for this country than you or I could ever quantify. The clerk's eyes darted around, looking for allies. Every bystander suddenly found the floor fascinating. Arya's silence held steady, her stillness building more pressure than any raised voice could have. Apologize, the judge repeated. The clerk swallowed hard, her lips trembled. Her pride fought a losing battle. Sorry, she muttered, louder. The judge insisted. Miss Redding flinched. Finally she forced the words out. I'm sorry, Commander. Arya studied her for a long moment, the smirk gone now. What replaced it was something gentler, almost pitying. Respect isn't a rule, Arya said quietly. It's a choice. The quote hung in the air like a lesson carved into stone. Just then, the courthouse doors opened behind them. 2 Marines in dress blues entered first, then an Army captain, then a Coast Guard petty officer, then an Air Force airman. One by one, uniforms stepped silently into the building, forming a quiet line behind Arya. Not because she called them, but because veterans talk, word spreads, and injustice against one uniform draws all others. They heard there was trouble, Judge Holloway said softly. And that it involved you. The clerk covered her mouth, horrified. The crowd parted like a tide around the gathering of service members. For the first time since the confrontation began, Arya's expression shifted, just a fraction. A tightness in her throat eased. Her chest rose slowly, as if a burden she'd carried alone had been lifted by unseen hands. Another quote formed in the air, unspoken but felt, "A SEAL never stands alone. Even in silence, the Brotherhood answers." Judge Holloway stepped forward. "Commander Dalton," he said, "I would be honored to escort you to the courtroom." He offered his arm, not as a gesture of authority, but of respect. Arya placed her hand lightly against his sleeve, and together they walked past the bystanders who now stood. Every one of them, in silent acknowledgement. The Marines followed behind her, forming an honor guard that no one had requested but everyone understood. People removed their hats. A few placed their hands over their hearts. Some bowed their heads. Even those who didn't know military protocol instinctively rose, because dignity, when witnessed, commands reverence. Ms. Redding sank into her chair trembling, realizing the magnitude of what she had done. And as Arya passed her, she paused just long enough to offer one final line. A quote that would later be repeated online thousands of times. "The uniform isn't cloth. It's the promise of every person who never came home to wear it again." The clerk began to cry. Inside the courtroom, Arya's testimony was brief, precise, and devastatingly effective. Her friend won his case. He wouldn't have to fight anymore. Not the system, not his pain, not alone. When Arya stepped back into the lobby afterward, the crowd was still there, waiting, not to demand anything, not to intrude, just to stand, quiet, present. One by one, the Marines saluted her. Then the others. She returned each salute with the same steady grace she carried underwater, through firefights, and across every emotional battlefield she'd ever survived. And for the first time in a long time, she felt not the weight of her uniform, but the strength of it. This story reminds us that respect is not something granted by authority. It is something earned by sacrifice, carried in silence, and recognized by those willing to look deeper. Wherever you are watching from today, take a moment to honor someone who serves, or who has served, someone whose battles you may never see, someone whose uniform, visible or not, deserves dignity. Comment below where you're watching from. Share your thoughts. And subscribe for more stories that honor the quiet heroes among us.